Gmail, labels versus folders. In this video, we're going to walk you through the steps about how to be able to take an inbox that has quite a few emails and try to be able to organize them so our inboxes are not as cluttered and full as they once were. The idea, I think, that all users who use email often find themselves with the daunting task of managing the mountains of emails that we get. And so Gmail has come up with a different way in which users can be able to clean up their inbox. Now, for those of you who are, for all of us who are making that switch from Outlook to Gmail, there's a couple differences that make people they notice a fair amount of differences. The first off is the layout between Outlook and Gmail, that they have a different sort of definitely different look to them. And the second one that often gives users quite a bit of pause because it is quite different is the idea about a label versus a folder. So folders are what lives in the Microsoft world. Is the idea that if you get an email into your inbox and now I am done with it, but I don't want to necessarily delete the email. I want to be able to save this email for one reason or another. Then I move the email out of my inbox into one particular place, a folder. And there's folders inside of folders and such. But the idea that Gmail came up with the idea that says we don't want to necessarily have folders per se. We just want the emails to be out there, but just labeled and tagged or identified that they can be found and searched for later on. And also that the idea that an email can have multiple different labels. So let's say I have an email about it has something to do with a particular PLC group that I'm working on, so I can make it labeled part of that PLC group, but it may also have something to do with an assessment strategy that we're doing, so I can also have it labeled along with that as well too. So the idea that we can have multiple labels for each email. So anyway, let's walk through the steps so you can see this here. So I'm going to jump back over to our Gmail here. We can see we're in our inbox, and I have 4 emails that have been read and a new one that hasn't been read yet. And if you can remember, the yellow over here identifies these are being flagged as important because they are from people within our district, and here's some without. But what I want to be able to do is get these out of my inbox because I have 4 emails in my inbox. I want to be able to see if I can get down to that mythical inbox 0, which I know for myself included, for like so many others, that's seems like something that will never happen. But at least we can try to be able to reduce the amount of emails in our inbox. So what we need to be able to do then is create some organization for that. And so my normal labels over here, I have inbox and starred, important. And if you can remember, we could say more, and that can bring up more of my labels that have already been preset. But I have another one here that didn't come with Gmail, and that's called a geometry PLC. There's even a green color next to that because this is a label that I have made for all things having to do with geometry. Now I want to start cleaning up some of my emails over here, but if I look over, none of these necessarily have anything to do with geometry. This is about a test that we're doing, and this one here is about something called SAMR, which is an educational technology way similar to Bloom's taxonomy. And so I've been doing a lot of research on SAMR. I want to be able to organize my emails about SAMR. So I'm thinking this would be a great email to be able to organize a little bit. Well, first off, let me take a look at it because I haven't read it yet. And as I open up the email from Carrie here, there's a link for me to check out, and she even included a graphic. Okay, this is something I may want to be able to check out later, but I don't want to leave it in my inbox. So I'm going to go back to my inbox, and I need to be able to label this thing, and that's different from moving per se. So let me show you how that works here. First off, to do something with it, I want to be able to click the checkbox, and now my toolbar up here has changed a little bit, and I can archive and delete. But there's 2 more. There's one called Move, and another one called Label. And they're a little confusing, but similar yet different. So let me first off show you what the label looks like. I want to be able to identify this as something to do with SAMR, but I don't have a SAMR label yet. So I'm going to have to go to Create New and give myself a new one called SAMR. If needed be, I could actually have a label inside of that label. That'd be a nested label. Let me click Create. And now, if I refresh my inbox, I'm going to see that here is the email from Carrie and a description as we've seen before, but now there's this little box over here and it defaults to this gray and white, and I can actually change the color. And for many people, color is quite important, myself as well, because it gives a visual sort of a check to be able to see which ones go to what. So if I go over here to on the left-hand side where all of my labels exist, I can click the drop down. And there's things I can do. I can hide some labels and edit and remove them and all that. But up here for the label color, I can change some of them. So let's make this one the SAMR red background with white text. And now that's changed. And so here's my inbox with 4 emails. If I only wanted to see the emails that had something to do with SAMR, if I click here now, only brings up the inbox of just those. If I go back to my inbox, there's my 4, but this one has now been identified differently. So it's nice now that there's color to it and I can ultimately see it. The problem, though, is it hasn't really cleaned up my email. It's still sitting in my inbox. So a label will give it just the idea that it sits within your inbox, but I can actually move it as well, too. So let me click on the checkbox and let me do something with this thing. Now I'm going to go, not necessarily the label on the top. Now I'm going to move this. I want to get it out of my inbox and move it to just SAMR. So now if I'm going to click on this one, now it's gone. It says the conversation has been moved to SAMR. And now we can see my email box went from 4 to 3. And how can I be able to access all of those emails? The SAMR ones, where did Carrie's email go? If I click over there, now her email shows up here and it will live there forever, and it does not live in my inbox. And so that is the recommendation that we were saying for us to be able to kind of help keep ourselves more organized with those emails. And I can do that multiple ones. So that was just one, but theoretically I could say, give me all 3 of these emails and I want you to be able to move them to one of my particular labels. Okay, it's something I can do. And I actually can grab them from the side and drag as well too, if I want to be able to do that. Move those conversations. These don't apply, so I don't want to necessarily do that. And so that's a way to be able to go through existing emails. But I'm going to show you one more step now. That for those of you who are feeling like you're a bit full and you're kind of just want to play with your labels, you can stop here. But if you want to be able to take a next step to be able to see how I can automate this process, we're going to use a thing called filters. And what filters are going to do is saying all new email coming in, I can have them be labeled as well too. So what that's going to happen here is I got to create a filter. So if I'm going to go over to settings, and my cog over here, click on the settings wheel, and across the top, here's general. Here's one, labels. We've been dealing with labels, and this is where I want you to be able to see is that you can actually organize, manage, and which ones you want to hide, which ones you want to show, which ones you want to get rid of per se. And so this is where all your labels are at. So I already had one called the one that we made together called SAMR, but there was one I made before called a Geometry PLC. And thinking, let's say if I'm in a geometry team and I want to be able to keep all of my correspondence and emails with my geometry folks in one particular place. So that's where I'm going to put emails, but I'm also going to do something for all future emails. And so that's going to go up here on the top to this thing called filters and blocked addresses. So when I go up to the filters, it says, which filter do you want to be able to do? And we don't have any right now. So I'm going to go to create ourselves a new filter. And this is a giant, what's called an if-then statement. So if something happens, one of these things, if I get an email from a particular person or has something in the subject or even just simply has the words, then something else can happen. So what do I want to think about the if? I'm going to keep it at some of the most basic. If an email comes into me and simply just has the word geometry within the word, then I want something to happen. Create a filter. What should happen? And these are the things that can happen. It could skip the inbox and go right to archive, or I could star it, or I could forward it to somebody else. If it comes right in, I can delete it or spam it. But watch this. I'm going to go over here to apply a label. Which label do I want? I'm going to say every email that comes in with the word geometry, then just label it part of my Geometry PLC. And click create filter. And now it's been done. Now this is going to happen for all future emails. So if I click on my inbox, I don't have any emails about my geometry, having anything to do with geometry. Now I've timed it so I'm sending another email to myself right now. So in the next few seconds, we should see an email pop up. And when that email comes in, there's the word geometry within there. And we'll see if a label has been attached to this thing. Let's come over to our inbox and refresh. And we should be able to see there's a new email for myself. And it says new, that just went away. And then there, by the way, here it is. It says this is automatically going to get labeled as a Geometry PLC. Now it's not moved at all. I just said label it. Theoretically, I could go into my filter and actually move it as well too if I don't want to necessarily see them. So now it's about you being creative with your inbox and thinking about what sort of things do I want my email to do. For example, if I'm involved with it's a conversation with with my principal sending a weekly newsletter out. I can say every time something comes in from my principal with the word newsletter, I want that to be moved into a folder called newsletters. And so automatically all of those will get added over there. Or something that comes in for our adoption pilot team that we're working on. So everything that has the word pilot that comes in will now be labeled one way or another. And that gives us an easier way to be able to identify and be able to retrieve them, and then also to be able to kind of organize and hopefully try to keep our email inboxes not as large as they've been.